With everything going on in the world, from economic disparity, hate crimes, and rape, is it possible that we as a civilization are becoming less empathetic? Are certain cultures or certain races more or less capable of empathy? And does empathy enhance our ability to be happy and to be more successful in the world? I think it's ignorant to think you can answer all of these questions in one video, but I'm gonna take a stab at it. Empathy, often confused with sympathy, is our ability to swap places with our peers, friendly counterparts, unfriendly counterparts, loved ones, colleagues, etc. Welcome to another episode of Advice from a Jackass. My name is Romany Malco. I am the founder of the PEP, the People's Empowerment Platform. It's a place where growth-oriented people go to explore the possibilities of holistic success. We cover everything from psychological wellness to financial integrity and everything in between. Let's get it started. Empathetic behavior is most often witnessed in relationships involving animals. It is suspected since they love unconditionally, they have an innate ability to connect and mirror human behaviors more easily. That's interesting because I came across a lot of humans who can't even mimic human behavior. I'm dead ass. Before we go any further, I want to drop this little disclaimer. I am not a self-proclaimed guru, motivational speaker, life coach, or know-it-all. I'm just a regular dude trying to learn how to be better. So what is empathy? There are 3 types of empathy. Keep in mind, exploring the notion of empathy is to completely dissect the standard definitions of both empathy and sympathy. Sympathy is classically defined as sympathy or sorrow for someone's misfortune. Empathy in its classic definition is to experience a broad range of emotions as it relates to another person. Now, there are 3 types of empathy: emotional empathy, cognitive empathy, and compassionate empathy. Emotional empathy is often referred to as parallel empathy. If a subject were to begin crying, you also would begin crying. It would feel as if the feeling or emotion were contagious. You feeling anything? Then there's cognitive empathy, which is when you're able to put yourself in the shoes of another, thus allowing you to share in their perspective or experience without necessarily having to engage in the emotion itself. For example, I've seen people cheat on their significant others repeatedly with very little discretion. I'm talking about pregnancy scares and the whole deal. And the minute their significant other laughs at a joke told by another man, their cheating asses become suicidal, threatening to jump off buildings and shit. Talking about they gonna throw theyself in front of a bus if she keep doing that. I'm like, what bus? You in Cape Coral, Florida. They ain't got no buses. They ain't even got public transportation. What you should do is jump in front of a crocodile with your cheating ass. But I digress. The point that I'm trying to make is that these cheaters lack cognitive empathy and cannot share in the perspective or experience of what it's like to be cheated on until they believe it is happening to them. Then the 3rd type is compassionate empathy, which is best exhibited as concern, genuine concern, not that fake concern, not that internet concern, not that one post concern, but real concern. Compassionate empathy is best illustrated in professional situations as it does not risk emotional imbalance, yet shows the proper amount of concern for one's safety, well-being, or experience. Compassionate empathy still allows for connection and a demonstrated act of caring, even outside of a professional situation. Just wanting everyone to be afforded the luxury of eating and being treated fairly can be considered compassionate empathy. So now let's take a moment to try to understand the empath. Have you ever experienced a sensation where you felt compelled to mirror a feeling or behavioral response coming from a stranger or someone you didn't know well? If so, it's possible that you may actually be an empath. I don't want you to confuse empathy and psychic ability, although the 2 are closely related. Y'all remember Cleo? Call me. Empathy or empathetic responses are very easy to understand and digest. In its simplest form, an empath is someone who is especially sensitive to all emotions in animals and in humans. Now, before we go any further, I want to make this really clear. I don't care if you hit that like button. I don't care if you hit subscribe. But I do care that you share this information with someone that you believe may need to hear it. If you find it valuable, please share it. And if you are an entrepreneur, I beg of you to stick around to the end of this video. I have a giveaway that I think you could benefit from. And one more thing, please request an invite to petrequest.com. It's an app that I created that allows me to notify you directly whenever I post videos like this. Where was I? Right, I'm trying to get a deeper understanding of empathy to figure out if we as a civilization are becoming less empathetic, if some of us are more or less capable of empathy than the other. How do you distinguish someone who has no empathy from someone who is considered an empath? So forth and so on. So let's get back into it. Empathy serves us well as organized members of society, primarily because it is a helpful attribute. Scientists are fascinated with the subject and have studied the notion in clinical capacities, such as in relationships between nurses and patients. Empathetic behavior is widely recognized in all facets of life as a skill set worth nurturing. Empaths are rather special in nature and have been appropriately coined as altruists by Fear Factor author, neuroscientist, and psychologist Abigail Marsh. She's of that scientific community, citing a profound difference in the brain of an empath versus a non-empath. The neat thing is empathy doesn't just start and stop with mirroring the melancholic. Empathy is able to express joy, anger, relief, happiness, regret, and the list goes on. Empathy is beautiful in nature and allows those with exaggerated abilities to be the comforters of the world. By tracing the journey of famed notables such as Jane Goodall, Mother Teresa, some might even argue Mahatma Gandhi, it's clear to see that empaths have had a major impact on the world, whether positive or negative. Now let's discuss the brain chemistry of empaths and non-empaths. The exploration of empathetic behavior is very fascinating to neuroscientists, partly because we don't fully understand the areas of the brain responsible. Both sides of the empathetic puzzle are a hot topic amongst the science community, as they attempt to answer the questions of what distinguishes an empath from that of the non-empathetic traits known as a narcissist or a sociopath. The absence of empathetic traits is equally as fascinating to researchers, while they attempt to isolate certain parts of the brain to paint a better picture. What they have discovered is that the part of the brain responsible for the feelings of empathy is the right supramarginal gyrus, which is part of the cerebral cortex. In certain studies, it was suggested that criminals don't altogether lack empathy, but rather an ability to spontaneously demonstrate it. Scientists speculate that demonstrated empathy in a criminal or sociopath might be something that they have to work at, plan, or decide. In other words, the notion is not something that is innate or natural. So let me get this straight. A sociopath or a criminal has to work at, plan, or decide to be empathetic in the same way that a newscaster, politician, or an actor does? Scientists suggest that people who are expressly more empathetic than others, empaths, may have a set of mechanisms more unique to others. For example, they might compartmentalize emotions from others separate from their personal emotions. The brain of an empath is especially sensitive to electromagnetic fields. EMS fields are better known as invisible areas or spaces with high-flowing energy, either because of their magnetic or electric forces. Sometimes it can be as easy as electric devices, cell phones, televisions, computers, etc. What about an electric eel? Like if an electric eel swam by a boat full of blindfolded empaths, would they feel it? I'm proud of that question. No, but seriously, sometimes these unexplained phenomena can be caused by natural anomalies to the earth. These interactions are not always negative, but they can affect an empath in many different capacities. Do me a favor, please. If you like the content that you're hearing so far, please share this content. Do you think that you are an empath, by the way? And if you do, please let me know in the comments. And lastly, I don't care if you hit the like button. I don't care if you subscribe, but it means the world to me if you would follow me at peprequest.com. If you join me at peprequest.com, I am able to notify you directly when I post dope stuff like this. There's no need for email. I simply notify you through the app. We do a lot of giveaways on the app. What about introverted empaths? Well, they tend to have dopamine sensitivity. Dopamine, the neuron transmitter responsible for increasing neuron activity in the brain, resulting in the release of chemicals responsible for feelings of pleasure. They can experience what is referred to as synesthesia, a neurologic condition in which two distinct senses are paired in the brain. So for instance, hearing music when you see colors. They can experience higher forms of emotional contagion. This is when one person's emotions trigger the emotions of another, and the effects can manifest unconsciously. This means that the mirroring effect can take place without a definitive reason or intention. Maybe that's why some people find it so difficult to be around negative people. It could be emotional contagion. Look, man, I got family members that I love deeply, but they are some of the most negative people in my life. If negative was here and positive was here, my circle of friends, my associates, my mentors, they'd be kind of like in this area right here. But some negative folks in my family, they'd be kind of like they'd be like right around here. Can you see me? Right here. By the way, I'm not implying that I'm an empath. I'm a jackass. I'm just making the point that if you are someone who is very sensitive to negative people, I'm gonna tell you something that this jackass has learned. Boundaries reduce the need for battle. If I'm gonna experience emotional contagion, best believe I'm not repeatedly subjecting myself to negative people. Getting back on track, I have some interesting clinical evidence regarding the complexities of empathetic behavior. Now, scientific studies have concluded that developing a more compassionate outlook can be taught or trained. In fact, professional workshops often are in practice to foster the development of these skills in aspects of business, intimate relationships, and particularly areas of medicine. If you ask me, empathy should be taught in public schools and police stations. But because the notion of empathy is considered complex, there have been a number of clinical studies initiated to determine the brain activity of a person who both exhibits a high degree of empathy and/or a lack of it. Researchers have found that both extremes have propensities towards suboptimal mental health conditions. Have we even talked about the mental toll it can take on those who show a great deal of empathy? Stop it. That was a rhetorical question. In a recent clinical study titled Empathy and Burnout Implications for Those Who Care, it outlined whether or not emotional exhaustion is more prevalent in those who illustrate strong empathetic behavior. The study was published in the journal Current Psychiatry Reviews in 2017. It lends supportive evidence that empaths do suffer in some capacity as they absorb a lot of emotion that can sabotage their own well-being. In fact, here's another study, some detailed research on empathetic experiences. In October of 2013, the study was conducted by a team of researchers led by Tanya Singer from the Max Planck Institute for Human Cognitive and Brain Sciences. The tone of the study was built on the suggestion that egoism and narcissism appeared to be rising. In other words, it was hinted that empathy was on the decline as our nation moves into a generation of I. You get that? It seems the more we withdraw from the notion of community, the less we are able to empathize. Now, I know you've got other things to do, so here's an overview of the study's findings. The team found that our own feelings can distort our capacity for empathy. The overall findings were conclusive that when the submarginal gyrus section of the brain is not functioning as it should, our ability to express empathy is limited. The study involved a complex battery of tests and experiments. For the experiments, they used the findings of 2 participants, one of which was subjected to 2 distinct visual elements. They were then asked to analyze their experiences of their own or of their partners. Interestingly, as long as they were both exposed to the same type of positive or negative visuals, they could access one another's emotions without effort. The contrast was exposed when one was exposed to a negative experience and the other a positive. That's when their capacity for empathy declined rapidly. The study concluded that the participants' personal emotions allowed for a distorted view in the assessment of the other's feelings. The participants who were feeling good about themselves lessened the severity of the experience perceived by the other partner. The distorted view also went in the other direction. The participant that felt something negative minimized the positive experience felt by the other participant. That whole shit sounds like the United States of America. Actually, this explains a lot about the United States of America, because when you look at people who were born and raised in these underserved communities, they have absolutely little to no resources, can't afford full-time teachers in their schools, don't have clean drinking water, inconsistent sanitation in some of these communities. When they cry out or speak up, they get quit whining. If I can make it in this country, so can you. Your attitude is what's holding you back. If I can do it, anybody can do it. That's kind of like telling somebody with clinical depression to snap out of it. Yup. The only difference between this study and this great big experiment that we call the United States of America is that participants of this study were not harmed and did not experience adverse effects. Look, I don't want to go on a full-on rant, but it seems to me that my sense of fulfillment, whether we're speaking spiritually, emotionally, or professionally, is in direct proportion with my ability to empathize. At this stage of my life, when I hit a glass ceiling, I know automatically that the reason I am stuck is because that area of my life requires more empathy than I've been giving to that situation and or the people involved. And sometimes I'm just too stubborn to be vulnerable and empathetic, and I'll stay stuck. Sometimes stuck for years. But at least this way, I cannot blame anyone for my lack of progress in any given area of my life. Hashtag DIF, for them is facts. I think we're clear on the difference between being emotional or sympathetic versus demonstrating true empathetic behavior. And if you are getting anything valuable out of this video, I beg of you to share it. You ain't gotta hit no like button. You ain't gotta hit no reaction button. You ain't gotta hit no subscribe button. I also want you to follow me at petrequest.com. If you go there and request an invite, I will give you a link to an app that will allow me to notify you directly whenever I post to the platform that you follow me on. It involves no email, it involves no text messaging. It's just me hitting you up through an app, sending you a notification, say, yo, I just posted something that I think you might find important on the platform that you follow me on. One last thing for my entrepreneurs out there, if you find as though your social media posts aren't reaching as many of your followers as you would like, I would welcome you to come try the PEP. You can use it for 3 months free. There's no strings attached. If you don't find it useful, you can simply terminate your account. If you're interested in this at all, go to peprequest.com. That's peprequest.com and request an invite. Now, moving on. What I hope is that as more of these studies get underway, we as individuals might be able to better detect emotional contagion or mirrored behavior in ourselves, our peers, our friends, our pets and relatives, etc. But a key takeaway here is that a person's emotions can directly affect the way in which they empathize. So if a person is having a positive experience, they may minimize the negative experience of another person or group. And if a person is having a negative experience, they may marginalize or minimize the positive experiences of another person or group. So the next time you're having a moral debate on gender equality, politics, or the generational psychological effects of slavery, take this into consideration. And if you are an empath, I hope you see the importance in seeking safe spaces and communities in order to protect your gifts. Your physical and psychological health depends on it. Have any of you read the Slate article by Jason Silverstein titled, I Don't Feel Your Pain? Basically, what he was explaining was that it is perceived that Black people feel less pain. What's interesting about that is that there was another study in where they were tracking Filipino nurses who were administering painkillers and morphine and stuff to all these different patients in a hospital. And what they had found was that the Filipino nurses were administering less morphine to black patients who were experiencing the same degree of pain of patients who were non-black. And when they were confronted, they were like, no, we give the same amount of painkillers to each patient according to what they're experiencing. There are no exceptions. We prescribe on a patient-to-patient basis. But when presented with the actual data, the Filipino nurses were surprised that it was true. They had perceived black patients as being able to endure more pain, and as a result of that, prescribed less painkillers. We could probably record 12 videos just talking about empathy and bias. But it is becoming common knowledge that as the sense of community is on a decline, so is our ability to empathize. But the interesting thing is, in a book titled Insight by Dr. Tasha Eurich, empathy is one of the key factors to success. Another cool book, oldie but goodie, written by Daniel H. Pink, is titled A Whole New Mind. That book helped me understand that in a world run by computers, robots, and artificial intelligence, your only true job security is empathy. It's the one thing you can't outsource. Some dude working in India is not going to empathize with a Newport Beach, California soccer mom who wishes she could shield her house from G5 radiation. But if you live in her neighborhood, you might not only empathize on a deeper level, you may actually create the ideal solution. And that is how empathy gives you an edge. I know I get a little preachy, but empathy is at the root of some of the most innovative successes of our generation. Nurture your community, nurture your empathy, and use it to the advantage of your community. Trust me when I tell you, innovative, solution-oriented people with the ability to empathize will inherit the wealth. If you see value in this content, please share it. And if you'd like to qualify to win the book Insight by Dr. Tasha Eurich, please request an invite at petrequest.com. My name is Romany Malco. I am the founder of the PEP, the People's Empowerment Platform, and this concludes another episode of Advice from a Jackass.